Well, hello and welcome to Critical Weight Theory. So, you probably saw the title of this episode. It's You Can Tell When It's AI most of the time. So, you know that feeling when you're reading something and halfway through you stop and think, yeah, I don't think a human wrote this. You might not be able to explain why right away. Nothing is technically wrong. The grammar's fine. The logic checks out. But something feels off. It's too smooth, too polite, too clean. Now, to be fair, this isn't new. People have sounded like this long before AI showed up, especially when they're trying to sound professional or smart or serious. Academia, corporate emails, press releases, government statements, all of that. Humans have been writing like careful robots for decades, and that's why AI sounds like that in a way because it was trained on that sort of speech. So, sounding like AI doesn't automatically mean it is AI. In fact, at the end of this episode, I will provide an instance where I was oddly accused of using AI, despite the article in question teeming with elements of my own personality rather than AI. I say some things that are uniquely me rather than emanating from some program, you know? So, yes, people can sound like AI and will sometimes be accused of being AI, even when they are not. But still, there are patterns common to AI writing, and once you notice them, you start to hear the difference. So, let's start with the big one here: the tone, the overall tone. AI usually loves a perfectly polished voice. Everything sounds like it was written by a very calm, very educated person who has never once sent a rushed email or typed with one hand while holding coffee in the other. And every sentence is complete, every thought is balanced, or at least as balanced as it's programmed to be. Nothing is too emotional, nothing is too casual. Well, unless there's a certain prompt that a person might whip up and feed to the AI program, but usually emotion is not the biggest part of it. Plenty of humans write that way on purpose. Again, they're trying to look competent or authoritative or safe, but in real conversation, even professional people end up loosening up in most cases. They use contractions, they start sentences with the word and or but, they double back, they stumble a little bit. AI typically doesn't stumble. AI walks in a straight line practically every time. And that straight line is the tell. And another thing that's pretty obvious is there usually are not grammar mistakes in AI. Now, I've actually found some grammar mistakes. So the people who say that AI never does that, they're technically incorrect. I've had AI on the occasions where I've used it, for example, with spell checking or when it does an automatic grammar check. I've had AI use the incorrect grammar numerous times. So a lot of people don't know this, but things like grammar check, spell check, whatever you want to call it, that actually is a form of AI from what I understand. And it's something that I think not a lot of people get. They don't realize that there's been some elements of AI for quite a while now. We just didn't have like Chat GPT this whole time. And there's the classic giveaway, the moment where AI announces itself. That's another big sign. It'll say, as an AI language model. So that one's obvious. And yes, humans don't do that unless they are impersonating AI. You ask a simple question, and suddenly you're getting this weird disclaimer. No opinions, no liability, no responsibility. It's like a robot clearing its throat before answering. Now again, humans have their own version of this. Lawyers, consultants, corporate spokespeople making disclaimers, often under legal duress. They have to say allegedly, for example, if they're talking about criminal case, they will say allegedly. That's sort of like giving a disclaimer, sort of like what AI might do. But even they usually hide it better. They tend to end up looking more human rather than just trained robots. And when it's explicit, like saying as an AI language model, well, that's hard to miss. you know, People are typically not going to do that again unless they're impersonating AI. And another big tell is the obsession with lists. They have a lot of lists. Ask for advice and boom, numbered points, bullet points, sub bullets, a clean hierarchy of topics and subtopics will show up. So lists are not bad necessarily. Humans use them all the time, especially when they're organizing thoughts or teaching something. So when it comes down to articles, for example, list articles tend to get way more views than other types. So obviously, lists are important and popular. In fact, I have learned that even though I've interviewed people involved in movies, music, and TV shows, including some pretty famous and respected people, and actually even royalty, I've talked to a Cambodian prince once in an interview. But my interviews with such people, not only do they not really get much money for me or anything like that, but they don't get a lot of attention from viewers or listeners. And I usually get more attention from random articles or videos than from interviews. You know, it's very hard to say what's going to be the most popular thing that you create in terms of content, but a lot of the time it's not going to be some interview unless the person is like a very hot topic at the time. So you might be surprised how, like, I interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. He's a household name, and I annoy people when when I bring up the fact that I've interviewed him before. But nevertheless, that was not my most viewed article or my most viewed video for sure. So, yes, humans love lists, but they don't usually live inside of them. We ramble, we circle a point, we leave it, we come back to it later, we repeat ourselves without realizing it, and we add a half related thought because it feels relevant in the moment, but it might not be relevant. AI loves structure. So if everything sounds like a slide presentation, that's when you can notice that it is AI. Like, you can start to feel it. And that's why slide presentations are boring, because they feel robotic. They feel, I don't know, too neutral, too in the middle. And that's when AI is deeply, profoundly careful too. It'll end up creating that type of feeling, like it's too calculated, too calm, too devoid of emotion. And there will be a lot of hedging with AI too. It is a very careful thing. It'll say things like, it's worth noting that it's important to consider, generally speaking, potential drawbacks might include. Now, humans absolutely do this too, especially in professional or public settings. We're taught to soften statements, to cover our bases, to avoid being wrong, and all that kind of stuff. But AI stacks these phrases constantly on top of each other, layer on layer of caution. Nothing's ever just said. A real person sooner or later drops the act. They say, this works or this doesn't, or I don't buy that. They say that's bull crap, or whatever. AI just keeps the training wheels on, and it doesn't want to take them off. And finally, there's the ending of an AI article. So you get a generic conclusion, and it will usually say, in conclusion, and they'll say the key points and blah, 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 blah. So humans do this in school papers, sure, or when they're tired and they're just trying to finish. But in natural writing or speech, people usually end differently, with a final opinion, a weird aside, a joke, or they just stop awkwardly and they reach their end. You know, when an AI thing ends an article or whatever, it feels like it was hitting a conclude button, which makes sense. That's basically what it's doing. You know, it's a very calculated thing. And people, if they're really skilled at communicating ideas, they'll try to have some memorable, lasting impression. AI doesn't tend to do that. You know, it just ends. It just stops. And people can do that as well, of course, but AI tends to do that almost all the time. It lacks a sense of style and all that kind of stuff. So no, none of this means that sounding AI like proves something was written by a machine. Humans have been writing stiff, careful, overly polished text forever, right? So the difference is frequency and consistency. If it's too clean, too careful, too structured, and it seems like it's doing that every time, that's probably AI. Humans break character more often. AI rarely does, unless unless there's some kind of glitch or it's prompted in a unique way to sound more human, which can happen, and that complicates things more. But once you tune your ear to the standard AI elements, you start hearing it everywhere where there is AI to be found. And as promised, I'm going to get into the article that I was accused of, you know, writing with AI. So I was talking about this is a good example. I was talking about the band Limp Bizkit, and I had a part that said criticism derided for simplistic lyrics and Fred Durst's controversial frat boy persona. They also have an album titled Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, and it somehow doesn't make them any weirder or cooler. Maybe they were trying to be more Butthole Surfers like, but they're not fooling anybody. Limp Bizkit is no Butthole Surfers. Now, to my mind, I'm not reading the article right now. This is me like speaking in the present. To my mind, the sentence that maybe they were trying to be more Butthole Surfers like, that's not a sentence typically found in AI. Like, AI normally wouldn't just randomly come up with a comparison to the Butthole Surfers based on the uh, title of that Limp Bizkit album, right? So I also go on to note that having a beer called Fred Thirst is delightfully and painfully on the nose. It's wrong in the most delightful way, and I have a hard time hating it. I also appreciate that LB know their reputation precedes them, so there's at least a self awareness thing going on. My main thing about Limp Bizkit is simply that Wes Borland is a talented guitarist. If my ears were to zero in on any one thing as being good here, it would pretty much be him. In fact, he managed to do tapping stuff on the guitar while playing for the song, preventing him from coming across as another Eddie Van Halen style show off. I actually kind of respect that. Still, I would pick Korn over Limp Bizkit any day of the week, and it's not particularly close. So that's the end of my example there. So none of that, to my ears, sounded like AI. Yet this is the article that somebody chose as a, an example of me likely using AI to write my article. I don't understand that personally. Like I've said in the past, if they were going to accuse me of using AI, they should have chosen a more robotic sounding article, like a news article or something, where you're kind of going to sound a little bit more robotic and neutral, just as a matter of course. You know, if you're writing a news piece, you're typically not going to be writing your personal opinions, at least not that much. Um, but for some reason, this is the article that I was accused of using AI. for. And that's a strange thing to me. I still don't understand why they went with that example. And you know, it's a strange thing to me. I also said that when it comes to that like Limp Bizkit, there's a better band in there waiting to come out or something like. Or maybe I was talking about Creed, because they're another example here. But you get my point. I said a bunch of things in the article that were obviously original ideas, and they didn't sound AI generated, so that threw me off. And so yeah, I guess maybe I'm ending the episode on sort of a sour note with this, but it's a little bit strange. I still don't understand that. So if you have any examples of badly written AI, like ultra generic, and you want to share them with me, let me know. If you've ever been, in your opinion, falsely accused of using AI, and I don't just mean like, a grammar check or something like that, spell correction or something like that. But if you ever targeted in that way, feel free to let me know about that. I'm curious about your example. And yeah, that's about it for this episode. Have a good day.